Hello and welcome to Computer Science. All right, so this is just going to be a short discussion of return statements inside of Python functions. All right, so what we have here, I'll make this a little bigger. Are two functions that effectively do the same thing. So we have this function weekly wage that has an input of rate and an input of hours. All right. And then the calculation it does is pay equals rate times hours. And then it prints out your weekly pay is, and then whatever value is in that variable pay. Over here, we have def return weekly wage. All right. It has the same inputs, rate, comma, hours. Does the same calculation, pay equals rate times hours, but then it has this line, return pay. All right, so what's the practical difference of these? So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to REPL in a second, and we're going to run each of these functions with some different commands and see sort of what the output is. So we're going to try running this one where we just call it and provide two inputs. We're going to try it where we set it equal to a variable and then print out the variable. And then we're going to try to do it as part of a larger calculation. All right, and we'll do the same thing for this one over here so we can get a better idea of how they're different. All right, so let's head over to REPL really quick. All right, so you should have this code. All right, it's been shared with you as part of the assignment. So feel free to follow along. But here I have that function from the PowerPoint. All right. And here I have the second function from the PowerPoint. All right. And then down here, I have all of those commands, and they're just all commented out. So I'm going to uncomment them, and then we're going to run them one at a time. All right. So the first one we're going to run is this one right here that does not have the return statement. It just has the print statement. So if I call weekly wage 15, 35, and I run that, all right, it does the calculation, it prints out the message, and it tells me my weekly pay is $5.25. All right, pretty much exactly what we would expect. All right, now let's comment this out, and I'm going to uncomment the next two lines. But this time, I'm calling the function, and I'm setting it equal to W. So W is being set equal to the result of this function, and then I'm printing out W. All right. So if I hit run again, all right, I get your weekly pay is $5.25, and then I get the word none. All right. So what's happening here? All right. When I get to line 23 here, all right, this function is being called. All right. And as part of the function being called, there's a print statement that says your weekly pay is. Right? That's why your weekly pay is showing up top. Right? But after it prints out that message, the function ends. All right? It's not sending back any result. It's not doing anything special. It just ends. So when we say W equals weekly wage 15, 35, all right, nothing's actually being placed into W. All right, because this function doesn't send anything back, it just runs a print statement. All right, so that's why when we try to print W, we're getting none there because we didn't actually place anything in W. So W is empty, and Python represents that by printing out the word none. All right, so let's hyphen out or comment out this right here. Let's uncomment the last one. And this is where I'm trying to use this function as part of a calculation. So if you think most people work about 50 weeks a year, so 50 times the weekly wage will tell us how much they're making in a year, assuming they're getting paid $15 an hour, and assuming they're working 35 hours a week. So if I run this, I get an error. All right, and it says unsupported operand type for int and none type. So the int is the 50, right? That's my integer. The none type is this weekly wage, because again, weekly wage is just printing out a value, all right? It's not returning any sort of result. And you're going to see what I mean by returning a result in about 2 seconds, all right? But basically, this is saying, hey, you're trying to do 50 times absolutely nothing. So that's an error. We can't make that work. All right, so now let's comment this out. And now we're going to move down to these down below. All right, so now we're calling return weekly wage. All right, and again, return weekly wage is the same exact thing, except instead of a print statement, it has what's called a return statement. All right, so I'm going to call return weekly wage with those same numbers, $15 an hour, 35 hours a week. And if I hit run, I didn't get anything back. All right, and it's not that there was a mistake. All right, I can hit run as many times as I want. I'm never going to get anything back. All right, and the reason I'm not going to get anything back is because I haven't told it to print anything. All right, so when I say return pay, what that does is it sends the number back. All right, so it sends the result back to line 27. This function call basically gets replaced with rate times hours or the variable pay. Now, because I didn't do anything with that number, it sort of just disappears, right? That's why I'm getting no results. But let's take a look at this line instead. Right? If I put this inside of a print statement, and now I hit run, I will get the 525. I don't get a sentence like I did up above because I didn't tell it to write anything, but I do get the number 525, all right? 525 basically gets sent back here, and then it says print 525, all right? The 525 is the answer to this function, all right? This function returns an answer. It gives us an output, and that output is the result of this calculation. So that result gets sent back here, and then we print it out. All right. So let's take a look at that version that we had up above where I try to assign the result to a variable. All right, so now I'm saying W equals return weekly wage, 15, 35, print W. If I hit run, all right, it's not that I didn't get a result, it's the same result as before. I'm getting the 525 again. All right, what's happening here is this function is being called with these values. The calculation is happening. The result is returned, and then that result is stored in W. So when I print W, I get 525. If you remember, when I tried to print W up here, I just got the word none because nothing was being returned. Now that value is being returned, it's being saved into W, and when we print out W, we get the result 525. All right. Now, let's take a look at the last one here. This is where we're using the function call as part of a calculation. All right, so return weekly wage, 15, 35. I'm actually going to multiply that by 50, not by 2. And the order is different, but obviously that doesn't matter because it's multiplication. So in theory, this should return the 525, and then that 525 should get multiplied by 50. And let's see what happens. All right, it does. I get the result 26,250 because, again, with the return statement, that number is getting sent back, and that number gets plugged in for the function call. So now it's 525 times 50, whereas when I tried to do that with the print statement, it was just giving me an error. All right, so a lot of the functions we write going forward are going to start returning values. And the advantage to being able to return a value is you can save it in variables and then use those variables later on. You can use it as part of larger calculations. So it makes our functions sort of more versatile. All right, this first function here is nice because it prints out a formatted statement, but that's really all it can do. It can print out that formatted statement, and that's it. I can't use it as part of like other calculations or different applications. It's sort of boxed into just this one feature, which it does well, but it makes it kind of limited. And then you as the coder would have to write separate functions for each separate one that you wanted to do, which becomes a little tedious. By making the function more generic and having it return its value, it makes it more versatile so we can reuse it in other ways. All right, so let's go back to the PowerPoint for a second. Now, you might not have realized it, but you've been using functions that return the result since pretty much the first day we started using Python. All right, so when you use sqrt in Python, that's a function. Right? You might not have thought of it as a function, but somebody had to write the code that would actually calculate square roots. So if we kind of think back to what we just saw, if I do sqrt, let me actually go back and do that in the command line. So if I go over here and type in, let's hyphen out this, and do another one, sqrt, all right, this isn't actually going to do anything, all right? I'm not going to see anything show up on the screen because, yes, Python did the calculation, but I didn't tell that calculation to show up. So it did it. It calculated the value 6, and then it just disappeared. All right, so sqrt is a function that's returning its value just like this function up here. So if we actually want to see the result, we could do print sqrt36. And then when we hit run, all right, now the result is actually showing up because it gets returned and then plugged in to this print statement. All right. Same thing here with these more involved ones. All right. POW is another function that returns its result. And because it returns its result, we can use it as part of a larger calculation. So POW 3, 2 is 3 to the second power. So that'll give us 9. And that value gets returned and plugged in here. Plus POW 4, 2, which is 4 to the second power, or 16. So it's 9 plus 16, 25, which then gets plugged into this function, the square root of 25, which then goes into h, because that value also gets returned. So h now has the number 5 in it, and then when we print h, we'll get a 5. So let's go back to REPL really quick. So I could go h equals sqrt for square root POW 3, 2 plus POW 4, 2. And again, each of those values is getting returned. So it's plugging in, and then it's feeding into this square root function where it does the actual calculation. Then if I say print h, because those values have been returned, all right, I will end up with the 5 that I'm expecting. All right, and there it is right there, 5.0. Now, you might not have thought about it this way, but when you use your make picture function, all right, that's also returning a value. All right, it's returning what's called a picture object, and we're storing that picture object in whatever variable you come up with. So we've been using functions that return the results pretty much since day one, sqrt, POW, make picture. We just haven't been writing functions that return their value. All right, but we are going to start doing that, which is what today is building towards. So what you're going to be doing is there are a bunch of practice problems that are all about setting up functions that return their results. So you're going to be working through these practice problems 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There are also 2 bonus problems that you can do for extra credit. But you do have to do the first 5. Those are the required 5. Now, to kind of show you the process, we're going to do this first one together. So it says write a function that takes as input a temperature in Fahrenheit and returns the Celsius equivalent. Recall that the conversion formula is C equals F minus 32 times 5/9. All right, so let's go over to REPL. And we are going to write a function. So at this point, feel free to delete sort of all of this test code. All right, this was really just for the demo so that you could follow along and see what was happening. We don't need that anymore. All right, now you'll notice there's two comments. It says all your test code should go below this comment. All of your functions should go above this comment. So we're going to create a new function. All right, and this is going to be a temperature conversion. All right, I'm going to put in some comments here. All right, the inputs are temperature in Fahrenheit. The outputs are going to be the temperature in Celsius. And the purpose of this function is to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius. So again, anytime you write a function, it's a good idea to have those comments in there. And this is the format that I like to use. Just list the inputs, list the outputs, list the purpose of the function. And that gives everybody who looks at it like a real clear view of what's happening. All right. So I'm going to call my function def, and then I'm going to call it F to C for Fahrenheit to Celsius. All right. And then I'm going to have my left and right parenthesis. It's expecting one input, and that input is the temperature in Fahrenheit. So I could just use F. I could use FAR for Fahrenheit. I could spell out the word Fahrenheit, but then that's just a lot more you have to type. So I'm just going to go FAR for Fahrenheit. And then I'm going to have my colon. I'm going to hit enter. Make sure that you're indented. And then I have this calculation to do. All right. C equals F minus 32 times 5/9. So I'm going to write this as SEL. I could also just do C equals, but I'm going to do SEL equals parentheses FAR, because that's what I named my input variable, minus 32 divided by, multiplied by 5/9. All right. So there's my calculation. And now what's new here is I'm going to say return cell, all right, for Celsius. And that's going to send the value back. All right. Now that I've written my function, I want to test it to make sure that it actually works. All right. We just can't take it on faith. So I'm going to go down here. And if I do F to C, and then I try something. So maybe I want to see 50 degrees. All right. Now, if I run this, what am I going to get back? Absolutely nothing. All right. Why did I not get back anything? Because, again, this is returning the value. So, yes, it returns it to this spot, but nothing was done with it. So it just sort of disappears into thin air. All right. I could do this. I could say print F to C, and then I'll get an answer. All right. 10.0. If I wanted to format it, I could be fancy. I could say the temperature in Celsius is, and then close my quotes, do a comma, and then call my function. And again, that will get sent back and the result will get put in there. And then if I hit run, it'll tell me that the temperature is 10 degrees. Now you might be saying to yourself, that's great, but is that actually the right answer? So I have a little Google converter here. All right, so let's see. If I do 50 degrees Fahrenheit, yes, that is in fact 10 degrees Celsius. Now, it's usually a good idea to try your function with more than one result, just to make sure that it works on a whole range of values. So if I put in 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it should tell me that it's negative 17 degrees Celsius. So let's try that. So I'm going to replace the 50 here with a 0. And it's telling me it's negative 17. Great. All right, so it works for a positive number. It works for 0. Let's try it for a negative number. So negative 32 degrees Fahrenheit is negative 35 degrees Celsius. So let's type in negative 32. Let's run it again. Yep, and there's that negative 35 that I was expecting. All right, so I've got a pretty good indication now that this function right here is working correctly. So here's what you have to do at this point. And I want you to do this for the demo as well, because I'm going to be expecting the demo in your final submission, is you can take this code and you can copy it. So you can either copy it by right-clicking and choosing copy, or I would just do Control-C, right? Control-C stands for copy. You're going to go over to the Google Doc that's included with this assignment, and you're going to see there's spaces for you to paste all of your code. So I'm going to go right here to Demo Code from Video. I'm going to hit Control-V, and it's going to paste my function inside of the Google Doc. You will be doing the same thing for question 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You need to paste your code inside of here so that when you're submitting this document, I can just very quickly look at all 5 functions in one spot. I do not need the test code that you use to check your function. All right. Notice that I didn't paste the print statement here. That's just for you to test. Like once you're done testing, you can delete that out. All I need is the actual function itself. As far as kind of what you're doing here, going back to these questions here, this one's a pretty basic calculation. A lot of these deal with like circle, area, and perimeter. Just a reminder that PI is a recognized word in Python, but only because at the top of the code that I gave you, it says from math import. Right? If we weren't importing the math library and you tried to use PI, it would give you an error. All right, but you can effectively use PI anywhere in your code, and Python will plug in the value of pi. So when you're writing these functions, feel free to actually use PI, and Python will plug that in for you. All right. Notice that some of these functions are requiring you to use other functions. So the cylinder volume function should use the circle area function that you wrote in step 3 as part of its calculation. All right, you shouldn't rewrite the code for the area of a circle. You should use the code that you've already written and use that function, because we saw when you return values, you can use them as part of larger calculations. All right, the same thing for number 5 here. The volume sequence, you're going to be using your cylinder volume function that you wrote in number 4. All right, number 5 is really about kind of setting up a loop. All right, so you're going to set up a loop, and in that loop, you're going to keep calling this cylinder vol function and have it print out the different results that it needs to give back. All right, so that's what you're going to be doing. My reminder is that all of your functions should have a return statement. All right, you should not be printing out in your function like we did in that very first demo. All of your functions should have a return statement. All right, if you want to print out the value, you can do that down below. The only exception there is is this one will actually be printing out values, all right? And that's why the word print is underlined there. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 should just be returning values. 5 is the only one that's going to print values as opposed to returning them. All right, so I hope this was helpful. As always, reach out if you have questions or you get stuck on anything. I'm happy to help and provide assistance. All right, have a great day, and I will see you soon.